Yes, good morning, everybody. Somebody is asking a question here, V19HE5A1. Is it similar we saw in C language hash pragma? Yeah, it is. The purpose of the alignment is for faster access of information from the memory. So in the C language, yes, it is done using that hash pragma pack directive. Hash pragma pack directive, or what is that? You go for structure padding. Yeah, that structure padding is for that purpose only, for faster access. Okay, let's continue with the discussion. Right. So we were discussing about what we completed discussion about the memory access. Okay. So I told you 32-bit processor core means 32-bit instructions, 32-bit address bus, 32-bit data bus. Okay, and 32-bit ALU, of course. Right. So the 32-bit address bus implies that we can address 4 GB of memory. So this 4 GB of memory, every address location in the 4 GB of memory is going to be a 32-bit address. Hence, whenever we are trying to access one byte, any one byte randomly in a 32-bit memory location, there is never a problem there at all. So accessing one byte of memory randomly from any location of the memory is not really any problem. But whenever you want to access 2 bytes, which is also called as a half word, I repeat, whenever you want to access 2 bytes from the memory, which is called as a half word, or you want to access what we call 4 bytes, which is called as a word in this CPU architecture, 32-bit CPU architecture, then if you are accessing 2 bytes from a address location which is divisible by 2, then it would be accessed in a single clock cycle. Where similarly, if you're trying to access 4 bytes of memory or 32 bits of 4 bytes of uh, information, or 32 bits of information from a memory location which is uh, divisible by 4, then you can access these 4 bytes in a single clock cycle. So it ensures that in the data bus, 32-bit data bus will be completely utilized in a single shot if you're trying to access 2-byte data or 4-byte data, provided the starting address of the 2-byte or 4-byte data is a memory location divisible by 2 or 4 respectively. But if the starting address of a 2-byte data that you're trying to access or a 4-byte data is not a memory location divisible by 2 or 4, then this accessing will be taking extra clock cycles or additional clock cycles. Okay, next. The next point is talking about what we mean by reduced gate count. So the ARM core has been carefully or very intellectually designed. ARM cores are being very carefully and intellectually being designed in such a way that they are making use of very less number of logic gates in building the what we call logic of the core. So less number of logic gates have been carefully put together to build the logic of the core. Hence, we say it supports a reduced gate count. So because of the reduced gate count, because less number of logic gates have been put together to design the logic. So because of the reduced gate count, so obviously the number of logic gates are reduced. If the number of logic gates are reduced, then what happens is the power consumption, the overall power consumption of the uh, core will be decreased. And because of the number of logic gates being reduced, the number of fan-ins and fan-outs also will be reduced. So because of the fan-ins and fan-outs being reduced, also the switching speed in the core will be what we call very efficient. The transistor switching speed, or the you can say the gates switching speed, will be very fast or swift. Next, that apart from that, They have been very closely packed also because of the reduced gate count also. So the size becomes small. So because of size becoming small, the propagation delays will be reduced. And because of the propagation delays being reduced, you will be getting overall the high performance from the ARM cores. So the ARM cores have been designed for really high performance, what we call requirements or implementations. Okay, next, the ARM core features. Somebody is asking a question. That is not important whether CMOS logic is used or some other logic is used. That is really not important right now. It will be it will be a very efficient logic, of course. I don't think it will be directly CMOS. It will be more better than CMOS. CMOS was being used for 8051 architecture, but for ARM architecture, it may not be CMOS. It may be more better than CMOS logic. So at the hardware level, the design level, what is the logics used? That is not really so much important. It's necessary for a VLSI engineer to know about that. That is also not important. Whatever question you're asking, any proportion of reduction of gates, that not to worry about that issue at all, because that is all related to a hardware design, a VLSI design issue. For an embedded system professional who's trying to learn about ARM, he just has to know the point that the ARM core has been designed with a less number of logic gates. Because of the less number of logic gates, what is there is the power consumption will be minimized. And because of the less number of logic gates, the core becomes more compact. The core becoming more compact means the propagation delays will be reduced. Because of the propagation delays getting reduced, you are getting a high performance, what we call through this core. So that is about the reduced gate count. We don't, we as embedded systems engineers should not at all worry about going at the hardware level of the ARM core. How many logic gates? Are there million logic gates or 2 million logic gates or 5 million logic gates or whatever have been put together to design that? How many fan-ins or fan-outs are for each gate? All that count or statistics is not necessary for us as an embedded system engineer, because we're not going to design the cores. We're only going to understand the core and use the core. So the next point talks about something called as high code density, as you can see in the features. So what we mean by high code density? Now the ARM core supports the core that we're talking about, that is the ARM 7 core that we're talking about. It supports two sets of instructions. One is the normal set of instructions, which is referred to as the ARM instruction set, and the width of the ARM instruction set is 32-bit in terms of size. Okay, the size or width of the instruction is 32-bit. And then we have another what we call instruction set, which is actually a miniaturized form of the ARM instruction set, 32-bit instruction set, or you can also call it as a thumbnail form of ARM instruction set. So they are also called as thumb instructions. Okay, I repeat, the ARM instruction, the ARM core is having support for two instruction sets. Normal RISC architecture is usually having support for a single instruction set. But ARM being a special RISC architecture, or you can say an advanced RISC architecture, as the name suggests, ARM, which stands for Advanced RISC Machine. So because it being an advanced RISC architecture, this core has been designed to support what we call two instruction set. One instruction set is a 32-bit instruction set, which is called as ARM instruction set. Then the other instruction set is referred to as what we call a compressed form of or miniaturized form of the 32-bit instruction set, or it can also be called as the thumbnail forms of the 32-bit instruction set. And this thumbnail forms instruction set are referred to as thumb instructions. The size of the thumb instructions is 16-bit, whereas the size of the ARM instruction is 32-bit. So if we take a particular area of memory, if we take a particular area of memory, let us take, for example, 1K of memory. 1K means 1024 bytes. Now, if I'm trying to write a program using ARM instruction set, then the maximum number of instructions that can be accommodated in a area of 1K will be 1024 divided by 4. Why? Because 4 by each instruction will be of 4 bytes in size or 32 bits in size. So 1024 bytes of memory divided by 4 will give me 256 bytes. So 256. So that 256 is the count of the number of instructions that can be accommodated inside what we call the 1K of memory. Now, again, if I take the 1K of memory into consideration and I try to write a program using thumb instruction set, then what is the scenario is thumb instruction set is a compressed form of the ARM instruction set or miniaturized form or thumbnail form of the ARM instruction set, which is half the size. Half the size means if ARM instruction is 32 bit in size, thumb instruction is 16 bit in size. So 16 bit means 2 bytes. That means 1024 divided by 2 will give me 512 instructions. So I can accommodate 512 instructions in a space of 1K as compared to accommodating 256 instructions in a space of 1K. That is the difference between ARM instruction set and thumb instruction set. Since I am able to accommodate a higher number of instructions in a given space of memory, we call this feature as high code density. Since I'm able to accommodate higher number of thumb instructions as compared to ARM instructions in the same given space, we call this feature as high code density. Okay, that's about high code density. Then the next point is is a point which is just saying that because the ARM core has a reduced gate count and takes very less number of logic gates, and because of the reduced gate count, the the core becomes compact, and because of the compact, it takes a very small area on the silicon wafer. So once it takes a very small area on the silicon wafer, that will save space or make it more compact CPUs. So with this, we come to the end of this discussion of this particular slide. So I'm moving on to the next slide now. Okay, now in the next slide, one second. The next slide, what you can see here is just information about what are the different debugging technologies which are by default supported in the ARM cores. So the ARM core, unlike your 8051 core that you have studied up till now, it supports what we call 3 types of debugging technologies built into it. So you have what we call JTAG is one debugging technology. JTAG stands for JTAG stands for Joint Test Action Group. So JTAG is nothing but it's a communication protocol, typically a serial communication protocol through which uh, a debugging device can be connected to what we call the ARM core, and it can get informations related to the registers of the ARM core or the memory of the ARM core, or else what we call other performance related information. It can be getting it through what the help of this JTAG interface. So JTAG, Joint Test Action Group, is basically a serial communication protocol, and this serial communication protocol helps a programmer or a developer to debug in real time on the hardware the performance or behavior of an ARM core. So we can go for single step debugging, we can go for breakpoint based debugging, we can go for observation of registers of the core, we can observe memory locations of the core. Okay, we can observe variables, or we can change the variables which are nothing but memory locations. These all things can be done with the help of what we call JTAG. And apart from that, the one more additional benefit of JTAG is it supports some special type of operation called as injection. So basically, what is an injection is whenever we are debugging the core. Just give me a moment. I'll just draw a picture and try to explain through a picture. So I'll annotate and draw a picture. So let us say this is the ARM based embedded system. Okay, this is your ARM based embedded system. So here we'll be having a JTAG port to the ARM based embedded systems, and let us say this is your PC or laptop. Okay, this is your PC or laptop. Now if this is your PC or laptop, then the PC or laptop will be connected to the ARM based embedded system, let us say through the JTAG. Now this is your JTAG. So obviously your PC or laptop will be having what we call a monitor, and using some JTAG interface, means a JTAG circuitry or interface like that. Let's take that JTAG interface or circuitry like this over here. So using a JTAG interface or circuitry, I will be connecting the PC or laptop to your ARM based system. Now whenever if you want to download a program written in your PC or laptop for ARM onto the ARM based CPU, it can also be done through JTAG. After downloading is complete, you can step by step debug the step by step execute and debug the program running in this ARM based system through your PC or laptop. Means as you are pressing, let us say maybe F7 or F8 like that, some specific key will be there. So when we are trying to press some particular key on the keyboard step by step, then you will be able to step by step execute the instructions and debug the outcome of that instructions with respect to registers and with respect to memory locations, with respect to variables, with respect to, let's say, IO ports. All this activity can be done with the help of JTAG. So whatever program that is running in the ARM based embedded system, that the window of certain instructions in the ARM program will be available in a interface here. Let us say you're having a tool here, a software tool is there installed in the PC or laptop. So if there is a program running inside here, let's say the program is of 500 instructions. So if the program is of around 500 instructions, now let's say this window that you can see can show you around 50 instructions. So the first 50 instructions of the 500 instructions will be visible to you in this window over here through the help of the JTAG interface. So as you are single stepping step by step, then you'll be observing the simple single stepping execution through this monitor over here. And as you are observing the single stepping through the monitor over here, that actually single stepping will be practically done on the core there. And whatever is the performance of the, whatever the outcome of the registers or memory locations like that, that can be viewed here through this window. So that's what JTAG does. Now in the JTAG, you also have some specialty called as injection. What is meant by injection is, uh, suppose you have already written a program and the program is uploaded through JTAG, and that window of some part of the program is shown over here. So as you are debugging, you have debug this instruction, debug this instruction, debug this instruction. When you come to this instruction, before you debug, that is single step debugging or execution, before you do that, you just realize by observing that you have made a silly mistake with respect to an instruction and you would like to change that instruction. So without having to make the change in the source code and load the entire executable code again into the ARM core, you can just make change of that particular instruction uh, through what we call JTAG interface. So only change or replace that particular instruction through the JTAG interface, and that will actually be replaced in the ARM system through what we call the support of JTAG. So this mechanism, which is supported by JTAG, to replace an existing instruction with a new instruction or a correct instruction logically when you thought it was wrong, this mechanism is called as injection. So we can inject a new instruction into that position of the old instruction or replace a new instruction into that position of the old instruction. This feature of supported by ARM JTAG is called as injection. So JTAG also supports injection. Then you have more higher end debugging techniques also that may be supported in the ARM course, that is called as ETM. ETM stands for Embedded Trace Module, as you can see the name there. And then you have real-time monitor. So these two debugging techniques that you see are a little bit more higher end. So with JTAG, you can only go for basic level debugging, like you can go for single stepping, you can set up breakpoints and execute till the breakpoint. Then you can go for observing the outcome of the instructions by viewing registers and by changing registers, by viewing memory and by changing memory locations, that is variables like that, by replacing an instruction with a new instruction. These things can be done comfortably with JTAG. But when you go for the next level of debugging, so an application has been written for an ARM core, and that application has to be tested in a real environment, but not a laboratory or what we call test environment. It has to be tested in the real premises of where this device is actually supposed to work. Normally, you'll be probably simulating it or testing it in a lab, but this equipment should actually be tested in a more precise environment in where it is going to actually work. So this type of level of testing is also supported in ARM cores, and this is called as ETM, Embedded Trace Module, or real-time monitors. So through the help of these two kind of debugging techniques, you can test the performance of your ARM program running in your ARM-based system in a real environment in which it is actually present, not testing it in a dummy environment. Maybe the real environment is this ARM system should be tested in an environment of extreme heat conditions or extreme cold conditions, or some kind of industrial environment in which a lot of pollutants are there, or a lot of different other environmental factors are there. But you have so far been testing it in your just laboratory environment or room environment or personal room environment like that, which is not an ideal place for testing how well that equipment works. So it has to be tested in the almost as possible the precise environment as much as possible. So this kind of testing is really possible with the help of what we call these debugging techniques that you see over here. These are called as ETM, Embedded Trace Module, or Real-Time Monitor. So through the help of these three debugging techniques, we can debug applications running on the ARM core at a basic level and at a more advanced level, so that when an ARM core is being used in designing what we call real-time systems, so it will give better performance or good performance in the real-time environment in which it is supposed to work in. So such kind of debugging techniques is supported in ARM, and they are named as Embedded Trace Module or real-time monitors. Okay, right? That was regarding the debugging techniques. Moving on to the next slide. Okay, so I've completed so far these features. Okay, I've discussed about these features, then I went on to discuss about these features. Now moving on to the next set of features. Now the ARM being a RISC architecture, and it is normal about RISC architectures that they don't usually support many addressing modes. So ARM being a RISC architecture like other RISC architectures will also support what we call relatively less number of addressing modes. And addressing modes are also simple addressing modes compared to CISC architectures. As far as ARM 32-bit is concerned, see, RISC architectures will in general have less number of addressing modes. ARM being a 32-bit RISC architecture, now if you compare a 32-bit CISC architecture and a 32-bit RISC architecture, the number of addressing modes present in a 32-bit CISC architecture will be relatively more in number as compared to the number of addressing modes in a 32-bit RISC architecture. A simple example, if I take a 32-bit uh, CISC architectures like Intel 80, one second, Intel 80386. Intel 8086 is a 16-bit architecture. Okay, 16-bit CPU we call it, and then Intel 186 is also 16-bit. Intel 286 is also 16-bit. Intel 386 onwards, it became a 32-bit CPU. So Intel 386, 486, Pentium, like that. So till up till some series, it was a 32-bit CPU. Then later 64-bit CPU has also come. Okay. So considering a CISC architecture which is 32-bit, like Intel 386, and considering what we call RISC ARM 32-bit RISC architecture, the number of addressing modes available in Intel 32-bit CISC architecture is more than, I think, around it will be more than, I think, around 12 plus addressing modes, maybe around even more than 16 plus addressing modes if you go for the Intel 386 CISC architecture. Definitely it will be more than 12 plus addressing modes. As far as ARM 32-bit RISC architecture is concerned, that we are discussing about, it supports 7 different addressing modes in this core. So relatively, you can see CISC 32-bit is having at least starting from 12 different addressing modes. I'm just giving a number 12. It may be more than 12 also. So it is definitely, I mean, it is somewhere around more than 12 addressing modes for sure, Intel 386. And if you go for ARM 7 that we're discussing, it is around what we call 7 addressing modes. So difference is there, that is 12, and here it is 7. So RISC architecture is having 5 addressing modes less. There may be little bit variations when you go for variants, not to bother about that now. Right now, it supports 7 addressing modes. Okay. Next. So ARM being a RISC architecture, just like any other RISC architecture, it has support for instructions which are of fixed size, and these fixed size instructions will help in what we call the pipelining. So it helps in what we call pipelining, because all instructions will be of same size, so smooth flow of pipeline can take place in the RISC architecture. So it supports uniform and fixed length instructions, which helps simplifying fetching and decoding and executing, which is activities inside a pipeline. Next, normal RISC architectures. Somebody is asking a question. Now let's see. See, ARM being a RISC architecture is having load store policy. So because of the load store policy, uh, the memory related instructions are minimized. So you will not have add with respect to memory or subtract with respect to memory, and what we call increment or decrement with respect to memory. So all memory related instructions for arithmetic and logic operations or data processing operations will be eradicated in the case of what we call the RISC architectures. So because the instructions are eradicated, obviously the number of opcodes or machine codes related to the CPU will decrease. So if the number of opcodes are going to decrease, that also implies that the number of addressing modes also will be decreased. So if the number of addressing modes will be decreased and opcodes are decreased, then the control logic, the circuitry of the ARM core is reduced. Because of the circuitry of the ARM core being reduced, it becomes more compact, and because it becomes more compact, it will be more efficient and it will take less power consumption. If more addressing modes are there, it means it is going to take more circuit logic for that, and it is going to be taking more power consumption, relatively speaking. Okay. Coming to the next point, you are having normal RISC architecture. ARM being a RISC architecture, like any other normal RISC architectures, ARM will support load and store instructions. So what is a load instruction? A load instruction are type of instructions which bring data from memory into registers, hence called as load instructions. Store instructions are those type of instructions which put the data present in the register into a memory location. So we call them as store instructions. So ARM, like any other RISC architecture, supports load and store instructions. But in addition, ARM being an advanced RISC architecture, it also supports load and store multiple instructions. So what is the meaning of this load and store multiple instructions? I'm going to explain. Normal load and store instructions will be allowing you to get from memory either 1 byte of data or 2 bytes of data or maximum 4 bytes of the data, because the size of the data bus is 32-bit. So minimum 1 byte, then next intermediate 2 bytes, next is what we call 4 bytes. So maximum is 4 bytes of data can be brought from memory into a register, or can be loaded from memory into a register in one instruction. Similarly, when you talk about store instruction can be used for storing up to 4 bytes of data available in a register into memory locations in a single instruction. That is called load and store instructions normally. Now, ARM being an advanced RISC architecture, it supports load and store multiple instructions. What is the meaning of this is, in a single instruction, I can transfer n units of data. Let us say 1 unit of data is 4 bytes for a normal load and store instructions. In a ARM being an advanced RISC architecture, it will support additionally instructions which will help uh, transfer multiple units of data in a single instruction. If multiple units means multiple 32-bit data are transferred from memory locations to registers and vice versa from registers to memory locations with the help of a single instruction which programmer has given, we call this feature as what we call load store multiple instructions. So ARM core supports this type of instruction called as load store multiple instructions, where multiple data units of size 32 bits can be transferred from memory to registers and from registers to memory, vice versa, in a single instruction. So effort of the programmer is one instruction. But of course, based on the number of data units specified in the instruction, uh, as number of data units are varying, the clock cycles required to transfer data from memory to register and vice versa will be changing. But from programmer's point of view or developer point of view, his effort is reduced to only one instruction, where through this one instruction, n units of 32-bit data are being transferred from memory locations to registers, and vice versa can be transferred from registers to memory locations. This feature is called as load store multiple instructions. So because of this load store multiple instructions, it will maximize the data throughput. Data throughput here means the number of data bytes that can be transferred in a single instruction. That is called as data throughput. Now, ARM core can be connected to a memory and uh, be designed as a microcontroller, or ARM core can be connected to a memory outside the microcontroller. It depends. ARM core supports 32-bit address bus. So 32-bit address bus means 4 GB of memory. This 4 GB of memory, majority of portion of this 4 GB of memory will be uh, attached to the core and make up a microcontroller. Otherwise, apart from that, a memory can be attached to the core, but it will become an external memory. Instead of being an internal memory inside a microcontroller, it will become an external memory or off-chip memory to a microcontroller. So of course, there also performance will matter. If you're trying to fetch from on-chip memory present inside a microcontroller, it will be more faster and efficient compared to fetching from off-chip memory connected to the microcontroller. Yes, ARM does support orthogonality. ARM being a RISC architecture is fully orthogonal. Correct? Good question. So V19HE4, it's a very good question that you've asked. ARM does support orthogonality. So basically what is meant by orthogonality? If all the instructions can be sorry, if all the registers can be accessed in the same fashion, if all registers associated to the CPU can be all accessed in the same fashion, then we call this as orthogonality. So ARM, being a RISC architecture, is fully orthogonal. It supports orthogonality to the fullest or maximum. Okay. So once again, please, everybody just have a reading of the slide. Any more questions you would like to post? Up till this point, I have discussed 3 slides regarding the features of the ARM core. Any more questions you would like to post? You can try to post. I'll try to answer them. No questions? Okay. The last point in the slide talks about what we call conditional execution. Okay. So ARM core supports instructions. These instructions will have what we call the instructions in the ARM core will be data transfer instructions. Then you'll have arithmetical and logical instructions will be there, and then you'll have branching instructions in the core. So normally, when we talk about arithmetical and logical instructions, you know what they are. So I don't need to explain in detail about them. Arithmetical and logical: addition, subtraction, ANDing, ORing, XORing, okay, like that. And then the data transfer instruction is trying to transfer data from memory to register or register to memory, such as the load store instructions, and transferring data from register to register. So these are all coming under the data transfer instructions. Somebody is saying something. Orthogonality means that at any instant can support all addressing modes. Orthogonality, what my knowledge of orthogonality is, orthogonality refers to a feature of the core whereby all the registers of the core can be accessed in a similar fashion. So when we say accessed in a similar fashion, it is talking about what we call addressing modes, of course. So if all the registers of a core can be accessed in a similar fashion, let it be general purpose registers or let it be special function registers. If all these registers can be accessed in a similar fashion uh, throughout, means special function registers can be accessed in this way, as well as general purpose registers can also be accessed in this way, then we call such kind of feature as orthogonality. All right. So all registers of a CPU, if they can all be accessed in the same fashion, that is called as fully orthogonality. Let me give an example trying to explain orthogonality. If I take 8051 as an example, now 8051 CPU, we have what we call special function registers. Now, what is the addressing mode the special function registers can be accessed through? Can all the special function registers of can all the special function registers of 8051 be accessed using register addressing mode? No. Okay. All the special function registers of 8051 cannot be accessed using register addressing mode. Only very few registers like accumulator and B register, and I think DPTR in a particular instruction, like particular instructions. So only very few out of the 21 special function registers that you're having in 8051, very few, maybe up to 4 registers at most, can be accessed using special what we call register addressing modes. The remaining special function registers cannot be accessed using register addressing modes. Hence, we say that 8051 architecture does not support full orthogonality. But all the special function registers can be accessed using direct addressing mode. Is it true? Yes, all the special function registers can be accessed using direct addressing mode. Can all the special function registers be accessed using indirect addressing mode? No. See, you can see now the variation. All special function registers can be accessed using direct addressing mode, but all special function registers cannot be accessed using indirect addressing mode. Can we access general purpose registers in 8051 using direct addressing mode? Can we access general purpose registers using direct addressing? Yes. We can access general purpose registers using direct addressing mode. We can access general purpose registers using register addressing mode. We can access general purpose registers using indirect addressing mode. So you see, with respect to general purpose registers, there is a level of orthogonality for the CPU. So all these general purpose registers can be accessed using register, using direct, using what we call indirect addressing mode. But if I come to special function registers, all special function registers cannot be accessed using register addressing mode, and all special function registers cannot be accessed using indirect addressing mode, but they can only be accessed using direct addressing mode. So it is not fully orthogonal in the case here. So usually the CISC architectures may or may not support full orthogonality, but RISC CPUs will support full orthogonality. Okay, I hope the discussion regarding orthogonality is okay. Any more debates on that? Any more debates on the orthogonality concept? If no debates, I'll move ahead. If debates, please come up. Okay, no debates. So I'm moving ahead now. So the next point says conditional execution of instructions to maximize the execution throughput. So what does this feature imply? Now, in ARM, as I told you, we have branching instructions, and then we have the regular instructions such as data transfer instructions and arithmetical logical instructions. So when we want to write a program, let me try to explain this point because I cannot go into programming right now. It's just a features discussion. So I'll try to explain this point in a different way because I cannot give example of instructions over here at this point right now. So let us consider C language. I'm trying to annotate here. Let us consider in C language, and this is a block of code in C language. Okay, in this block of code right now I'm having instruction number 1, instruction number 2, instruction number 3, instruction number 4, instruction number 5. Next I'm having an if condition. Okay, if condition, which is instruction number 6. Then instruction number 7, instruction number 8, instruction number 9, instruction number 10. Close the if condition. Then let us say I'm having else condition. So I'm having set of instructions here. So mind you, this is instruction number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Next you have 11, 12, 13, and 14. So I'm just drawing a picture here in which a block is there. In that block, I'm drawing some lines which indicate instructions. And then I'm giving an if condition, which is also an instruction like that. And inside that if condition, I'm giving a block of statements. And then I'm giving an else block with a block of statements. I hope this is visible. Okay. Now, if we consider a 3-stage pipeline, everybody, the ARM core that I'm discussing right now, ARM 7 core, it supports a 3-stage pipeline. So if I take the 3-stage pipeline such as fetch, decode, and execute. Okay, so fetch, decode, execute is the three-stage pipeline. Now, when instruction number 1 is in the fetch state, then decode and execute state would be empty. When instruction 1 comes to decode state, instruction 2 would be available in the fetch state. When instruction number and execute state will be empty. When instruction 1 comes to execute state, instruction 2 will be in decode state, instruction 3 will be in fetch state. Is this point, up till this point, is this understood? Please comment. Please comment up till this point. Is it understood? Okay. Now, similarly, I'm moving ahead. So now when instruction 2 comes to execute state, instruction 3 will be decoding, and instruction 4 will be in fetch state. Okay. So like this, if I just proceed, I'm just putting dots here. In this way, if I'm just proceeding, at some point, let us say instruction number 6 is in execute state. If instruction number 6 is in execute state, then instruction number 7 will be in the decode state. Instruction number 8 will be in the fetch state. Have you understood till this point?
So
Okay. So if I just continue like this, now instruction number 6 is in the execute state, and instruction 7 is decode state, instruction number 8 is in the fetch state. Now the instruction number 6, which is in the execute state, the condition may satisfy or the condition may not satisfy. So that instruction, which is a conditional instruction, the condition may be satisfied or it may not be satisfied. If the condition is satisfied, then it's all happy, it's good. Because if the condition is satisfied, then instruction 6 gets executed because of the condition getting satisfied. Sorry, if the instruction number 6, which is in the execute state, is executed because of the satisfaction, then instruction number 7 will come to execute state, instruction number 8 will come to decode state, and instruction number 9 will come to fetch state. That will be a smooth flow. But if, let's say, the instruction number 6 condition for during execution is not satisfied, then the presence of instruction number 7 in the decode state and instruction number 8 in the fetch state would be a waste, would be useless. So what happens is, these two instructions which are present in the decode state and fetch state have to be flushed out from the pipeline stages of decode and fetch. Means they have to be cleared from that two stages, and then the next instruction, which is instruction number 11 and 12, must come in through the what we call fetch state. So first, if this is flushed out, see, normally if the condition is satisfied, this will take place. This is normal case. Abnormally, now if again we consider here, and if this condition satisfies, it goes ahead like this. But if this condition fails, during the execution, then the presence of 7 in the decode state and 8 in the fetch state is useless, is waste. So if it is waste, this has to be flushed out, and these two have to be flushed out. If these two have to be flushed out, so let us say an extra clock cycle is being wasted in flushing out these two stages. I'm just saying from just a basic understanding point of view that at least one clock cycle will be required. At least, I'm just saying at least. It may be more than one clock cycle, cannot exactly tell right now, because that is an internal operation of the core. It is not visible to us outside. So unless if you use some kind of debugging tools. So at least one clock cycle, let's say, will be spent in flushing out these instructions. If one clock cycle is spent in at least in flushing out these instructions, then in the next clock cycle, instruction number 11 will be coming to the fetch state. Then in the next clock cycle, instruction number 11 comes to the decode state, and instruction number 12 comes to the fetch state. Then in the next clock cycle, instruction number 11 comes to execute state, then 12 will come to decode state, and 13 will come into fetch state. So see the delay of time from here. See from here, at least one clock cycle, if I say, is spent, so that one clock cycle is wasted. Then for that instruction to be fetched, one clock cycle, another clock cycle, another clock cycle. So by the time it's spending around at least 3 clock cycles before another new instruction can be executed. So from this point, if it is correct, fine. But from this point, if it is wrong, at least extra 3 clock cycles are being spent before the pipeline stage can be allowed to function again properly in a smooth flow of execution. So this extra clock cycles which are wasted to fill the pipeline so that it can again come to its normal stage, that there will be a smooth chain of or flow of instructions that can flow through the pipeline and always keep the CPU busy. So that extra clock cycles are wasted. So because of these extra clock cycles that are getting wasted over here, this gives rise to what we call a lag in the execution. Lag means delay in time. Are you all following, please? Hello? I hope you're following.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So these extra 3 clock cycles are giving a lag, or they're pulling back the CPU in terms of execution, adding more delay to the execution. Hence, we call this lag as a disadvantage. So we call this as bottlenecks of pipelining. Bottlenecks means disadvantages or drawbacks of pipelining.
Then, sir, how to overcome it?
In a normal RISC architecture, you cannot overcome it. This will be there in a normal RISC architecture. So these are drawbacks of the pipelining. It cannot be overcome in a normal RISC architecture. But ARM being an advanced RISC architecture, so normal RISC architectures will definitely have to bear the brunt, or what you say, bear this problem. They cannot escape from this problem in a normal RISC architecture. If a condition satisfies, fine. If a condition fails, then the CPU has to waste time in these 3 clock cycles, fundamentally speaking. So normal RISC architectures have no option, but they have to bear this problem. But ARM being advanced RISC architecture, so the designers of ARM who have carefully designed ARM or thoughtfully designed ARM, they have designed ARM in such a way that, okay, even if this condition fails, this instruction and this instruction that is there in the pipeline, it will just smoothly flow. So even if this condition fails, if this condition fails over here, still this instruction, it will come to the execution state, and this instruction comes into the decode state, and what follows here will be the 11th instruction. So 11th instruction will be there. This instruction will just pass off as a NOP. This instruction will just pass off as a NOP, and this instruction now also, which is being decoded, in the next stage it will come here. That is from 7 it becomes 8, then 11 comes over here, then 12 comes over here. Then again this instruction 8, it will pass off as an NOP. So whatever is the instruction, it may be an add instruction or subtraction instruction or ANDing or whatever instruction it is, except the branching instructions I'm talking about here. Not branching instructions, the normal data transfer instructions or arithmetic instructions, logical instructions. These instructions will just come here and pass off as no operations. So 7 passed off as a no operation, then 8 had moved ahead, then 8 passed off as a no operation. So now in the pipeline we're having 8, 11 and 12. Then when 8 passes off as no operation, then you'll have 11 and 12 and 13. So now people, with this explanation, what have you observed is the advantage of this? Where am I saving time now? I have given an explanation now. From this explanation, you comment, how am I saving time now? Somebody say, somebody asked, how can we overcome this? So I have explained this situation right now. Now I am overcoming that drawback in some way. Can you comment or express in what way am I overcoming? How am I saving time? In which area am I saving time? One clock cycle is saved. So where is the one clock cycle saved? Please comment, where is the one clock cycle saved? On flushing. Very good, excellent. So I'm saving one clock. I'm just assuming that flushing is taking one clock cycle. Okay, it may be taking one clock cycle, it may be slightly taking more than one clock cycle. I don't have the real idea, but I'm assuming at least it takes one clock cycle. So it is saving one clock cycle and the remaining will go smoothly. So since I'm saving one clock cycle here, assuming that this kind of if else condition is occurring 100 times inside a program, if it is occurring 100 times and 100 times there are failure conditions, then 100 clock cycles I'm saving. So that 100 clock cycles I'm saving, that means in that way I am helping to improve the performance of the CPU by saving 100 clock cycles. Yes or no? So that wastage of 100 clock cycles is eradicated. We call this feature that is present in ARM, where I can allow an instruction present in the pipeline stage, decode and uh, fetch state, to pass off in the execution state as a no operation. Okay, they will not actually execute the way they should. They'll just pass off as NOPs, and smoothly the pipeline will again be filled with the next set of instructions appropriately. So since they are passing off as no operations and smooth flow of pipeline is taking place, where flushing is eradicated, time spent on flushing is eradicated, we call this feature as conditional execution. So the ARM core is supporting what we call conditional execution of the instructions. So because it supports conditional execution of the instructions, this benefit of conditional execution set, it maximizes the execution throughput, means the number of instructions that can be executed per unit time will be maximized with the presence of conditional execution. Means if I'm having let us say an add instruction or a subtract instruction or an AND instruction or an OR instruction like that, for example, the add instruction can be allowed to execute in a normal way. If it is executing in a normal way and conditional statement fails, then add and next instructions will be flushed out from the buffer, pipeline buffer. So time is wasted there. But I can allow the add or the next subsequent instructions to execute conditionally. So they will not have to be flushed out from the buffer. They will just pass off in the execution state as a no operation. We call this mechanism or this feature as conditional execution of instructions. So the arithmetical and logical or even the data transfer instructions can be written in ARM source to execute conditionally or otherwise pass off as NO operations without impacting on the uh, what we call without impacting on the pipelining stages. So that was the explanation regarding the conditional execution. I hope it's understood. If anybody wants to ask any questions, you can raise your questions.
Sir, flushing means?
Flushing means just removing the content present in the decode state buffer and the fetch state buffer, clearing the buffer. That's what we mean by flushing. Haven't you come across the word flushing in C language? Flush.
Yeah, clear the buffer.
So you've already come across that. Again, you're asking me. The word flush. Flush means nothing but flushing the buffer. So clearing the buffer. So I'm here clearing the buffer related to the decode state and the fetch state.
Okay, sir.
Any more questions? Otherwise, I'll move ahead. I'm erasing what I have annotated. Okay, so moving on to the next slide now. Right. So the next slide is talking about the number of core registers that are available in the ARM7 core that we're discussing. So the total number of core registers available are 37 in number. So it's a very beautiful number and a big number also. So 37 core registers are there, and these 37 core registers are excuse me. Now, these 37 core registers are each 32-bit in size. Okay, so 37 32-bit sized core registers are available. Since ARM being a RISC architecture supports register intensive processing, so it is a normal of RISC architectures to facilitate the core with more number of core registers for enhanced processing and better performance during processing. So 37 core registers are available, and size of each register is 32-bit. So even though 37 core registers are available, the user is not allowed or cannot access all the 37 core registers normally. He can only access what we call 16 registers, and the remaining registers will be said to be hidden, or it will be banked. So these 37 core registers are actually uh, distributed in the form of banks. So in one bank, you can access only 16 registers. So there are modes of operations in ARM, which I'll be discussing elaborately at later stage, not to worry. So it has 7 modes of operations. So whichever mode of operations that you go for, so I'm just mentioning them, but I'll explain them later. So you have user mode, you have supervisor mode, you have a bot mode, then you have IRQ mode, you have FIQ mode, you have undefined mode, like that. So 7 modes of operations are there. In whichever mode of operation the core is operating at a point of time, it is allowed to access only 16 registers out of 37 registers. So these 16 registers, it's like, I mean, these 16 registers which are allowed to be accessed out of 37 registers is a kind of protection mechanism which has been added by the designers of the ARM core for protection purposes. So see, if you take 8051, you have 32 registers, 32 general purpose registers. These 32 general purpose registers are divided into 4 banks, each bank having how many registers? 8 registers, R0 to R7. So R0 to R7 for bank 0, R0 to R7 for bank 1, R0 to R7 for bank 2, R0 to R7 for bank 3. True or false? In 8051, you're having 32 general purpose registers, and these 32 general purpose registers are said to be bank registers, each bank having 8 registers, R0 to R7. True or false? Okay, true. Right. So are these 32 registers protected? Means if the CPU is in one mode of operation, means in 8051, if the CPU in the if you consider the PSW register, PSW bit 3.4 and 3.3 and 3.4, sorry, if you consider the PSW bit 3.3 and 3.4, so based on the binary values present in these two bits, 3.3 and 3.4, 00 or 01 or 10 or 11, you'll be able to decide the register banks. So whenever you select any register bank, does it restrict you? Does 805 restrict you not to access the registers of other banks? Can you answer the question? If no, it does not restrict you. So whenever now you by default you are having register bank 0 on power up. So with register bank 0, using register addressing mode, you can access registers of R0 to R7. But using register addressing mode, if you want to access registers of R0 to R7 of bank 1 or bank 2 or bank 3, it's not directly, it's not possible through register addressing. It is only possible to direct addressing or indirect addressing. So that means there is no protection level there. Whether you're in whether you have selected bank 0 or bank 1 or bank 2 or bank 3, still you're allowed to access the registers of other bank. So there is no protection level in that case. Some people are annotating on the screen. Please do not annotate. Why are you annotating? I can see some people with blue screen annotations. Please do not annotate and create problems. Listen to the class seriously. Okay. So we have what we call the banks. Now 805 CPU or 805 architecture does not allow you to protect the registers of a bank. While you're operating with one bank, you can still access the registers of another bank. So there is no protection level. In the ARM core, you're having what we call protection level that has been added to the registers. So though there are 37 registers, when the ARM core is operating in a certain mode of operation, then you cannot access all the registers, 37 registers. You can only access at max 16 registers of the 37 registers. So this is what we mean by protection level. A hardware protection level has been created by the designers of the ARM core. Now the question is, why hardware level protection has been given? Can anybody try to answer this question? Can anybody try to give an answer to the question, why do you think the designers of the ARM core have given some hardware level protections? What is the benefit of giving a hardware level protection to the registers of a core? Please try to answer the question. It's an interview based question. Nobody is answering the question. I expect you to answer the question. What is the need for hardware level protection, or what is the benefit of having hardware level protection inside a architecture for registers? Okay, somebody has given one almost close answer. I mean, almost appropriate answer. One is not to allow overwrite. Okay. One is for exceptional handling. Okay. See, whenever you talk about simple CPU architectures and a bit more advanced CPU architectures, so the advanced CPU architectures will be running more advanced programs. So these advanced programs may be to avoid physical level. What do you mean by physical level disturbances? That sentence is not at all appropriate. V19HE4A10. That sentence, that phrase, sorry, to avoid physical level disturbances is not at all an appropriate sentence to be used here. Somebody has given for exceptional handling, okay, that is permissible. Somebody has given maybe because data overwrite not to be happen, okay, that is permissible. But what do you mean by physical level disturbances? So I'm just giving the answer. Just try to understand the answer which I'm giving. See, when you talk about simple CPU architectures, they'll be running simple programs. When you talk about a bit more advanced or complex CPU architectures, they'll be running more complex applications or advanced applications. So these advanced applications these applications or advanced applications for advanced CPUs may be divided in 2 or 3 categories. For example, there may be a category for system level program, and there may be a category for user level programs. Okay, so when you're talking about system level programs, these programs will be allowed to access some data through registers for system level operations. So when system level operations are under progress or operations, then other programs like user programs should not be allowed to access that uh, data present in those registers. So those registers should be protected from that purpose. So you may have maybe some protection level between system level programs which will access system level data. So if system level data has to be accessed, then a set of a set of registers will be allowed to access the system level data for processing. And while the system level data is accessed for processing, user level program should not override those registers with user level data and corrupt them to create problem for the system. So system level programs will operate with system level data, which will make use of some set of registers. Then user level programs will operate with data which will be used for user level, which will make use of some registers for user level data. So you may also have another category of programs which may interoperate between system level programs as well as user level. So a communication between system level programs and user level programs, that level also may exist. So based on the complexity of the CPU and the complexity of applications that are being uh, created around this CPU, you may need to protect data present in registers, which should not be corrupted by programs just like that. Hence, hardware level protections has been enforced in more advanced architectures such as ARM and other advanced architectures also. So the protection level has been incorporated. See, Intel 8085 did not have protection level for registers. Intel 8051 does not have protection level. Intel 8086 also does not have protection level. Intel 186 also did not have protection level. Intel 80286 had a little bit of protection level. Then from Intel 386 onwards, the protection level for hardware registers and also memory limits had been enforced in more advanced CPU architecture. So ARM being a 32-bit architecture and also being a bit more advanced architecture compared to the 8051 like that. So it has, the designers have enforced protection levels so that different levels of program can use those protected registers. So user level programs will use user level set of registers. Then protected level program or system level programs will use another set of registers. And some intermediate other programs will use another set of registers like that. If I take your cell phone as an example, okay, if I take your cell phone as an example and try to explain this concept using cell phone. Now, if you take your smartphone and Android phone right now, you will be whenever you purchase the smartphone and you power up the smartphone, it will come with some default apps. Okay, it will come in with some default apps, and apart from that, it will have some default system level programs. So the default system level programs that are there and the default apps that are there, when these apps and default system level programs are going to execute on the phone, they will be probably using some set of protected registers which normal user level apps should not be allowed to access. Now whatever settings that are there in those registers will be held safe when they are executing. Now, suppose if you are going to install an app from Play Store, so when an app is being installed from Play Store, then that time you are going to install an app from Play Store, and when app is getting installed from Play Store, it will be probably making use of some set of registers which default system level programs will not make use of. Okay, and as long as that that app is getting installed, it is making use of some set of protected registers which are different from the registers which were used by system level programs, default system level programs. So installation of the app or deinstallation of the app, like that, some configuration in the app settings. So maybe when the app is installed, it will have some default settings. You want to change from default settings, so you'll be using certain registers for that. Then you have what we call user level apps. So I mean, you'll have user mode of operation. So once the app is installed, you'll be executing the program, whether it's a default app or a installed app. When these apps are going to be executing, they'll be executing in a mode of operation called as user mode. So when apps are executing in the user mode, that time they'll make use of another set of registers for the user mode of operation. So those registers are different from the registers during installation, and those set of registers will be different from the registers which are uh, used by already pre-installed or default apps. So protection level has been enforced to ensure that data is not getting corrupted and system programs will not get corrupted and crash will not take place. So that's a simple example of what we call why hardware protection has been enforced. No, the registers are not read-only registers. They are both read and write registers. It's not read-only registers. They are both read and write registers. But only thing is you can read and write those registers in the specific mode. So these 37 registers, which I'm just mentioning, I mean, I've just mentioned the number. These 37 registers, how they are distributed is, out of these 37 registers, you will have a common set of registers. I mean, you'll have some registers which will be commonly accessible in all the 7 modes of operations. So some set of registers will be commonly accessible, or they are common resources for all 7 modes of operation. Some set of registers will only be accessed in the specific mode of operation, but not accessible in the other modes of operation. So those registers which are accessible in the specific mode of operation, but not available in the other modes of operation, these are called as banked registers. And the other registers will become common registers. So which are the banked registers, which are the common registers as per the modes of operations, I will share that with you later in a later point of discussion, but not now, not to worry about it. Okay, next, when we talk about ARM, the ARM core, since I told you ARM is not a single core, it is a variety of cores. There are certain cores of ARM which may support the use of catch uh, implementation, and there are certain cores which may not support the use of catch implementation. Basically, what is a catch? A catch is referred to as a high speed temporary memory which sits between the CPU and the RAM. So whenever frequently accessed data inside an application, such as for example, if you take a for loop will be making use of a variable for iteration. Now that variable for iteration is a frequently accessed variable which will be incremented and then compared, incremented and compared, or decremented and compared, whatever the case may be. So when it's a variable which has been frequently accessed, then this variable, if it is a variable with respect to memory location such as RAM, and trying to access that RAM location and update that variable, and again access that RAM location and compare the value of that variable after updation, will be a time taking process for a CPU. But if at all that variable is if that variable for iteration is not taken, it's not directly accessing RAM, but it is uh, copied or managed through cache. Okay, that incrementing and comparing of that variable, it is done with respect to a cache memory, which is a high speed memory or more faster or efficient memory than a normal RAM memory. Then the performance of the CPU will be better. So cache, use of a cache in an ARM based course may depend from core to core. Some cores may support catch, some core may not support catch. That is the discussion about catch. Okay, friends, I think I'll stop here for today.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir,
Yes.
that exam related announcement is there that I'm reminding.
Yeah, that's what. So, friends, I'll be stopping here today. Please do not exit right now. Please be online. I am exiting, and Chandramouli sir will be online, and he'll be completing the session. He wants to give some input related to the online exam and some any queries if you have. We'll be discussing that. So he will be the one who will be closing today's session. From my side, I am closing the session today. Sir will continue with the session and close it. So our next session will be from Monday usual time. Thank you. That's it from my side. Okay, Chandramouli, you can take over.
Yes, okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Hi, everyone. Recently, I think today morning you got the message regarding Monday's exam, Unix Weekly Theory 1. So, all are got it? Hello? Yeah. And now, one student is asked that, sir, in the Moodle, last time so many students are faced the problem. So, please conduct the exam like previous. But it is already clearly informed by Samir sir. So that is just for testing purpose. And the main problem is after your exam is started, due to the heavy load, I think we were expecting below 150, but based on the class 10 daily, but on the spot it is reached to 174. So we are not able to expect that much load. So it is very good. Actually, the count is very good. We are very happy in that count. But because of that, it is required to restart the server after exam is started. So because of that reason, so many students are got the issues. So this time there is no problem. So already in the module server, recently for new batches also we are conducted the exams. It is successfully done. There is no complaint from student side. So all are okay. So for that reason, we are going move ahead and conducting the exam on Monday. And there already it is given the clear instructions after login into the lms.vectorinstitute.co.in. There, go to your course page, that is local exam HE4 and HE5 is available. So go to that page, and there it is already posted exam. So that exam is not activated till to Monday's 2:30. Clear. So that is already given the instruction. So whenever it is reached that specific exam time, so you have to refresh the browser if anybody is open the browser before the exam time. After exam time, if anybody is login, automatically is reactivated. There is no problem in that. But if any student before exam time, if the student is logged in, so even though the exam time is reached, it is compulsory you have to refresh the browser, then only you are able to start the test. That instruction, it is already clearly given in the page. Once check it that. And one more main instruction, don't use the Google Chrome. Again, I'm repeating. So you have to write the exam in Mozilla Firefox browser. Then you will not get any issues. And if any student is utilizing the mobile app, fine, no problem at all. But if any student is writing the exam from system or desktop, so please note that we have to write the exam in specific browser, that is Mozilla Firefox only. If any student by mistake logged in other browser like Google Chrome or something, Then if any problem is occurred, so immediately shift to the Mozilla Firefox browser. Instead of shifting to the whenever problem is occurred, in the initial stage, if you are logged in Mozilla Firefox, it is better. Is it clear for all? So no problem in the exam conduction point of view. Now it is clear. And Monday we are having the Unix weekly theory 1, and within few days gap again we are going to conduct the Unix module theory also. Be prepared for that also. And currently Monday schedule is already given, SMS already sent, and in the page, that means in the local exam HE4 and HE5 course page, already your exam details you are able to see that. If you want, you can log it once and check it. Clear? Some students, instead of the LMS, IMS they are typing, please take care while you are typing. Clear? Don't forget that LMS, Learning Management System. Clear? So these are the things from my side I need to announce. And it is already announced in the class, last class after exam is over. Submits are already announced. Last exam what it is conducted, that is cancelled. That is not we are considering. This exam we will consider. Clear? Who are not attended last time, you can attend peacefully now. No issue at all. All you can attend. So all of you please attend that exam without fail. And for that reason, today once check it. What is the exam duration? And last time some student is asking, we are not having sufficient time. Excuse me. So for that, this time instead of 15 minutes, 1 hour time is given, 10 minutes extra time is given. Please utilize that properly. So this is from my side. If any student is having queries, you can ask now. Yes, is it clear for all?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, like the last exam, also the C questions will be there along with the Linux questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. That was
Here now also same way, because
Okay.
the main intention of adding C questions for any exam in order
Mhm.
to touch with the C subject from all students' point of view.
Right,
For
sir.
example,
Right.
so once you are conducting the Unix exam and any module CPP or 8059, so why you are adding those C questions in any
Okay.
interview? C
Mhm.
questions are very important. The first major priority. That is the
Right,
reason
sir.
we are not leaving C till end.
Right, right. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, is it clear for all? If any students are having doubts, you can ask.
Sir, instead of Zoom app, sir, shall we use GeoMeet, sir?
Come again.
सर जैसे कि Zoom ऐप है, जैसे Zoom ऐप पर हम क्लास कंडक्ट कर रहे हैं,
Yeah.
तो उसके बदले सर हम जियो मीट पे भी क्लास कंडक्ट कर सकते हैं सर. Zoom इज अ चाइनीज ऐप ना,
That
and it is same sir, it's a procedure is same sir. Geo Meet is the same app sir, like Zoom app.
What is that name?
Geo Meet.
GeoMeet.
Yeah.
Okay. I will give this information to the management. They will decide. I'm not able to
Okay,
decide.
sir.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your suggestion. Yeah. Apart from these things related to exams, any queries are there, you can ask me. If everything is clear, you can end the session.
Sir,
Yeah.
in last time we are kicking the answer. It will take 1 minute to come the next question, sir.
Yeah, that problem also it is taken care. Last time for each and every page only one question is available. Now instead of one question, number of questions are increased. Those options also it is reduced. So after completing all the things, all the problems what students are raised, we are working on that, and after solving that only we are come to the picture. That's the reason again we are able to start. Instead of starting last week, why I'm going for up to in between some other batches exams are conducted. From that we are able to get the feedback. So all other exams conducted it is fine, smoothly running. So for that reason, we are moving one step and conducting exam for HE4, HE5 combinedly.
Sir, hello,
Okay.
sir.
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, if there is any disturbance in the power or any internet connection,
So for that reason, already it is given 1 hour exam, 10 minutes time is increased.
okay,
And now listen carefully. Assume that same exam is conducted by the company. So what are the arrangements you have to do from your side? Are you able to give this type of reasons for the company people? Not, na? So
okay.
for that reason, alternate you have to take care. Now I am doing the co-host for this session. So after class is started, after some time power is gone. But what is my role here? I need to give support to the student due to a network issue. If any student is logged out again is trying to log in, I need to give support for admitting the student. So immediately I shifted to the mobile data. I'm doing from mobile data only till now. Like that, after exam is started, rare conditions, what are the critical conditions it is having chance to face, estimate that, assume that you are writing in the mobile, no problem. Only one thing you have to note down, only one thing, mobile charging is there or not, that's the main thing. And in the mobile also, it is having chance to disconnect the data in between after using the long time. Then what you have to do at that time, if you are getting that type of issue, simply do one thing, mobile data off and on, and if you are writing in the browser, close the browser, again log in. It will take 1 minute time. So that is not issue. In that way, you have to overcome that problem. And again, one student is asking, in mobile, can we go for with Google Chrome for exam? Again, I'm repeating, even though you're writing in mobile or desktop or laptop, don't use the Chrome, because of that right click is disabled in the Moodle due to some security reasons. In Chrome, it is giving issue, but it is not getting any issue in the Mozilla Firefox. For that reason, T6 better, you have to install the Mozilla Firefox browser in our mobile. Go to the mobile. Once you're accessing the mobile, you have to access Play Store, and then you have to install the Mozilla Firefox browser. Then you can write it. Otherwise, it is already given the clear instruction, Moodle. Directly you can install the Moodle application. From that Moodle application, you can log in. That is also fine. And some student is asking any improvement exams for A05 and CPP improving internal score. So once it is successfully done, I will think about that improvement exams, how to conduct. No problem. So after lockdown is started, because of only that internal score improvisation only, in our previous server, those many exams are conducted. And I think HE5 it is not conducted, but up to HE4 we are conducted. And while you are conducting the improvement exam for HE4 and HE3, we are giving intimation to the remaining batches, HE1, HE2 also through SMS. We are including those students who are having the less internal score regarding the placement purpose. So even though lockdown, n number of situations are there, so from morning to evening, we are working for student purpose. And so once this exam is over, once regular exams are over, then we will go for the improvement exams. No problem, that we will take care. So once HE5 is fully in, like n number of students are asking this thing, sir, HE5 also included in the campuses. So I am recommended, but my internal score is less. So that we will take care. So and once exams are started within a 1 week, week starting one module, week ending other module. In that way also it is having chance to conduct. So meanwhile, instead of waiting for the exams, meanwhile prepare related to those subject, which subject you are having the internal score. So prepare for that. then it is very easy for you people. So even though suddenly within 2 days, 3 days gap it is announced, so you are able to attend the exam, you are able to increase the score. That is my point of view suggestion. Is there any other doubts, queries?